Hey book girlies, I'm Sarah.
Hey gamer guys, it's Ian.
And you're listening to a pot of sass and sarcasm. You dancing over there?
Mm-hmm.
To our cute little theme music?
Yeah, it's in my head.
That's really funny.
I'm just pulling up the store description of the game I've been playing.
Oh, okay. I was like...
So I've been doing a bad job about giving you the correct titles.
Oh, really?
Or like tabs. Tabs? Tags. That's the word.
Oh, like genres?
Yeah.
You're telling me that all these discussions we've had about genre and mechanics and all that kind of stuff, you're telling me you've been lying through your teeth?
No.
How dare you?
Where is it? Where tag? Well, whatever.
Wow, that was a lot of effort for a whatever.
Okay, here, I found the tags.
So what games have you been playing?
I've been playing a new roguelike.
Of course.
It is called Drop Duchy, and it is a more puzzle type game.
Okay, that's like up my alley. I like puzzle games.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle and strategy game. Essentially what they do is they put you on a Tetris plane.
Okay.
And it drops you various Tetris shapes, and on each shape is a specific resource, and so you're trying to interact with all the resources in different ways.
Interesting.
The basic lands that it's giving you is just barren wastelands, plains, forests, and mountains. And then the other one you get access to relatively quickly is rivers. And so each of those gives you its respective resource when it's explored. And it becomes explored when you have an entire row filled. Where in Tetris that would disappear. That one stays on the map and it just gets filled and you get resources for it. And then the mainstay that you start out with, its main goal is to change things into other things.
Okay.
And the roguelike aspect is you are trying to go through a bunch of these, I don't want to say scenarios. It brings you through just like a map and you make choices saying, okay, on this next level up, since I just beat that puzzle, we are either going to heal or get a certain resource or draw for more cards. On these cards are different buildings, and buildings can either give you military units or help you gather more resources. And then the main aspect of the first duchy that you have control over, its main goal is to turn plains into fields.
Okay.
And they only can become fields through buildings or other aspects of the game. And then by them becoming fields, you get more of the resource that comes out of that, and it interacts with the other buildings that you have. And so you just kind of go through the same thing over and over again. And the way that this is a roguelike is once you beat it or you lose, you're achieving challenges as you go. So you're investing these challenge points into new and different buildings.
And roguelike is the type where it's like if you lose, you kind of go back to the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what makes this a roguelike, is that if you lose any of the challenges, you go back to the beginning and have to go through, and they give you like that randomized type of challenge, right? Like you can't necessarily go through the same challenges in the same order, or you might not even get some of the same challenges ever again, kind of thing.
Yeah, there's 3 specific challenges that you'll always get, but that's just like the checkpoints along the run.
Interesting. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of that sounded very physicsy, especially when you were talking about plains and fields and stuff, and I'm like, I think I know what you're saying there, but I just got some horrible flashbacks to my E&M classes, because I swear to God, if I have to like calculate anything with fields, I want to die.
You don't want to know about what is happening in that area of the field?
I hated electricity and magnetism. They suck. Why do I need to know this? Why? We don't need to know this. That's all I was thinking of when you were saying like, and this plane turns into a field and shit, and I was like, don't put a particle in there, and don't give it a charge, and I'm not doing the right hand rule. So
no, but if you put a fortified farm down, it turns all plains into fields.
I don't like that.
Within a range of 2.
That sounds too physicsy. Which is, I mean, this is coming from a physicist I can't even say the word physicist. I think I quit. But no, it sounds too physicist-y and Tetris-y, which is, I like the Tetris part. That part is probably the part I would love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the part that made me download it in the first place. I was like, I like Tetris.
I like roguelikes. I like Tetris. This is a Tetris roguelike? Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
What is it called again?
Drop Duchy.
Where does the word duchy come from? Like, what is this?
I don't know. It's a duchy is like a small piece of land.
Interesting.
Is a baron in charge of a duchy?
You are asking the person that doesn't know anything about any kind of political whatever. Every time you're like, I love political intrigue, I'm like, I have no idea how any of it works. I don't get why that's intriguing, but all right.
The word duchy is just making me think of duchess.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, is it just Dutch? Is he would the male version just be
a duke?
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, no, that's why I was asking about, because I was thinking of the word duchess, but I was also thinking of Dutch, like from Denmark.
Yeah, but I thought dukes had dukedoms.
Yeah. Why does that not make... Are you still trying to get it to be a duchy?
Mm-hmm.
How is it spelled? I'm asking probably one of the worst spellers in the world to spell something.
It's okay, I have it.
Mm-hmm.
Duchy.
Oh, it is the territory of a duke or a duchess.
Okay.
Also known as a dukedom. So drop a dukedom. That sounds too much like drop a deuce.
Drop a duke.
Dumb. That's funny. Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that one. Well, I don't think we have any particularly exciting announcements right now. Can I tell you about the book?
Yes, let's find out how Zarconar killed a bunch of people.
All right, so we are continuing to read Dreadful by Caitlin Xaxus. Our protagonist, Gav, used to be a dark wizard, the Dreadlord Gavrax. But when he got involved with the plot, including Zarconar, Xaxus, and Valevna, Gavrax had felt a little clever and tried to learn more about this plan and ended up losing his memories to Zarconar's pet knowledge demon. Now Gav has had somewhat of a change of heart and is trying to be a good person without letting anyone know that he is vulnerable and memoryless. This evil plot had involved him kidnapping a princess who will likely be sacrificed to summon a demon in Zarconar's ritual, and this princess has a few secrets of her own, as do many of Gav's servants and even some of the other dark wizards. Now it's all coming to a head, with the Garlic Festival in full swing, young heroes coming to the castle to attempt assassinating Gav and rescuing the princess, and now all three dark visiting wizards have arrived. Xaxus had attempted to, I guess, kill Terwin, mostly for shits and giggles. Basically, he wanted to see what would happen if he dunked her in a tank of water and didn't let her escape. And the answer is she would have drowned had Gav not stepped in. And then right after that, Zarconar had arrived, and his arrival itself had killed a few innocent bystanders. So after Zarconar arrived, Gav took all of the wizards back up to the castle. It seemed like the safest option at that point. Of course, that evening, Orla had prepared a feast for the party, and it didn't go particularly well.
I'm not surprised.
Don't you dare come for Orla. She's my girl. While Gav mused that the goblins at least had had a little practice with serving dinner since he'd been having those dinners with the princess, he found that even with Eliasha's help, Orla's dishes were just as strange and most of them were inedible. There was a blackbird pie with live blackbirds inside that flew out as soon as it was served. An eel pie with live eels, of course, swimming in the sauce. Lampreys with hot sauce, conveniently deceased this time, but too spicy for Gav. A hedgehog, a rat soup, and all of that is just in the starting menu. Zarconar refused to eat anything and just brooded in the corner, swirling his goblet of wine and staring menacingly at everyone. Xaxus was fascinated by the meals, but definitely didn't have the social graces to assess them as foods. He was mostly just like, oh my god, look at that stitchwork on that hedgehog. That's amazing. Not really the point, Xaxus, but all right. Valevna tried to be polite, and she did try to taste some of the dishes, but she did herself quite the disservice of asking questions like, what is this? Only to be disgusted by the answer.
What is this? Entrails.
In the middle of dinner, an assassin was detected using an invisibility cloak that I suspect Artharno had gifted to her. When she had made her move and jumped over the table, Zarconar froze her in place, and the other wizards tried to react to the situation in fairly predictable fashions. Zarconar stood lazily as Valevna drew herself back up into her chair. He paced slowly, that maddening smile playing across his face. Gav could see the assassin straining against the unseen bonds, to no avail. "One of yours, Gavrax?" he asked. Gav wasn't sure if Zarconar meant that she was employed by him or merely wanted to kill him, but he was certain he'd never seen her style of dress or her sword before in his life. "Not mine," he croaked and cleared his throat. The next phrase came out a little bit more respectably. "Followed one of you, maybe?" "Oh, good," Zarconar purred. "I don't suppose I'm overstepping my bounds as a guest." That tone only left one possible response. "Oh, no, you caught her. She's yours." It sickened him to say so, but he did not want Zarconar's attention to drift. He might start asking questions about Gav's security and about his staff. If someone was going to die tonight, better it be this stranger instead of Throck or Grrbeetle or Orla or him. But it made his stomach hurt in a way that he suspected it wouldn't have even a week ago. He wondered how Sirocco had managed all these years. "How nice to have some entertainment. This little party of yours was getting tedious," Zarconar said without bothering to look at Gav. He reached up and flicked the would-be assassin's scarf aside. Her hair fell, a waterfall of black silk. Gav couldn't have said why he got up to look her in the face. Maybe because he felt like he owed her at least that dignity, to be seen as a person before her inevitably painful and messy death. He'd expected someone breathtakingly beautiful, to match the elegance of the outfit and the weapons. She was disappointingly plain, though. Narrow dark brown eyes with a gentle tilt that would have been lovely on a different face, but they were set just a little too close together. Flat nose, thin lips, tan skin marred by teenage spots. She glared at him furiously, and he felt guilty for judging her. She was in her late teens, he determined. The perfect age to believe one could take on the forces of evil single-handedly and win. "And how did you get in here, my dear?" Zarconar wondered aloud. He reached up to her throat and flicked at a clasp Gav couldn't see. A ripple of distortion fell onto the table. Zarconar raised an eyebrow and poked at the puddle of invisible fabric. "Invisibility cloak, really? How mundane." He snapped his fingers, and the cloak burst into flames that licked the bottom of her outstretched foot. Sweat popped out on her forehead. Gav plastered an irritated look on his face, trying to fight the rising flush. He should have reconfigured the wards after Fiari had snuck in. Yet another critical task he'd failed at. "And who gave this trinket to you, Poppet?" Zarconar was saying. "Go ahead and speak. That's a good child." "The wizard Artharno," the assassin ground out. "She shall protect me. My heart is pure." "I'm sure it is," Zarconar said. "That old meddler again. I don't suppose she's keeping track of you." Zarconar's fingers traced down the girl's chest. Valevna watched him carefully, Gav saw. But the gesture did not seem particularly lascivious. Zarconar seemed more focused on her clothes than the flesh beneath. "Ah, yes," he said, smiling. Gav and the girl both shivered. "Well, you really must have been a favorite. She usually sends them out without so much as a tracking spell, but you have a direct power line to her. How lovely." He snapped his fingers. The assassin didn't have time to get more than the beginning of a scream out before fire consumed her from the inside out. Flames exploring her mouth and eyes before her skin blackened from beneath and crumbled into ash. It looked hideously painful, but mercifully fast. Gav didn't have time to blink, let alone consider intervening. He felt a wash of relief that he would not have to decide whether to step in. He'd expected Zarconar to indulge in some showy extended torture session. Then he realized he was rubbing his hands against his robes, trying to rid himself of the oily feeling of guilt clinging to him. He could feel the recoil up the line Artharno had tied to her chosen champion. Zarconar smiled in satisfaction. "That'll give the bitch a headache." Gav and Xaxus exchanged a look. The older wizard looked more present than Gav had seen him yet. And concerned. The expression fled almost immediately. Zarconar took his seat once more, twirling his goblet. The others sat more slowly, contemplating the greasy smear in the middle of the table. "Dessert!" Orla caroled, the doors at the end of the hall bursting open. Everyone but Zarconar jumped. His air of menace disturbed by the goblin's cheery presence. He abandoned the goblet and the pretense of politeness and stalked out of the hall. Orla watched him go, crestfallen, but rallied as her assistants wheeled in her piece de resistance, an enormous sautier of sweetened bread dough shaped into the form of a castle. Tiny candy humans wreathed in tiny sugar glass flames posed mid-scream on the ramparts. Valevna and Xaxus stared, bemused. Then they tucked into the first truly edible dish of the night. Xaxus gathered an entire handful of little people, biting heads off with gusto. Gav looked at the sooty stain on the table beneath the pastry and excused himself. So I thought this scene was kind of interesting and also very jarring.
Yeah, it was it was a bit interesting because there's multiple things happening here. Because it's showing us Xaxus being uncomfortable.
Which is,
but
I
just
found
for
odd.
a moment.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
My thoughts is it's not necessarily about what he's doing. I think it was he was concerned about the magic that he observed.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like the rebound magic. And that made him worried that the other wizard is going to show up.
Artharno?
Yeah. I think that's what made Xaxus concerned.
I was kind of at this point of wondering, because it said that he looked present and concerned. So not just the concerning part, but the fact that like he was like very aware of what's going on, which is unusual for Xaxus because he tends to be very scatterbrained and is just kind of off in his own little fantasy world. And I'm wondering if Xaxus isn't actually a mad wizard, but maybe Zarconar has some sort of control over him too, or some kind of like, I wonder if it's that mad wizard being like an appearance or something, but I also don't know if it's like a voluntary thing that Xaxus is doing. If it's not Zarconar, if somebody else is kind of pulling the strings in a way.
Yeah, but also I want to point out that Zarconar is putting on a major show.
Yeah.
He comes in killing, he immolates someone, and he's there proud and stewing in the situation he's created. And then when the situation is no longer terror of him, he leaves. Like he got annoyed that he wasn't being the center of attention and like feared in the moment anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. I think Zarconar must have something on all of the wizards. Otherwise, I don't know why they would have all agreed to help him, especially Xaxus. Xaxus is such a strange character because, like, why would he care to help with this other than he is just morbidly curious? But even so, like, they are all such solitary creatures that I'm very confused why any of them would agree to this, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I have some predictions of what's the ritual is for, but I don't know if this book is quite dark enough to do what I'm thinking it could be about. Essentially, I'm thinking since we know Demon Seed is one of them, we have a virgin princess, and we have a guy that meddles in the biology of things. So I'm wondering if they're creating some kind of like demon child.
Oh, they've all kind of suspected that they're summoning some kind of demon or god or something like that.
Yeah, well, I think they're creating a vessel for something.
Interesting. The last time that we talked, I had been saying that I think Artharno has it out for Gav because mostly when she's been stepping in, it always is seeming that she's trying to get Eliasha back, because I was assuming that Barabano had like hired her and then she then hired these other heroes. And so it always seemed to me that she was specifically trying to thwart Gav's role in this plan. But I also forgot how much Zarconar despises her and how much he like calls her a self-righteous bitch or like a sanctimonious bitch obsessed with her own righteousness or something like that.
Yeah, which is why I thought she wasn't the scorned lover.
But I'm wondering if part of this is an elaborate flirtation between Zarconar and Artharno.
Ooh.
Like, I'm wondering if that it's these two very powerful beings who are having a lover's spat of some kind where he forgot her birthday or some shit like that. And that's what this ritual is about, is to like do something big to get her attention or something like that. And it's like, you know, in like a lot of stories when there's two people that are like, they do shit like this because they love the other person and that they don't care about the fallout and they don't care about any of the collateral damage that they give off, but like they're so powerful and they're so self-absorbed in their own little lover's spat for some reason.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
I'm wondering if that's what this is.
It definitely has that undertone as a possibility.
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot to unpack in such a small scene, but I was just unsettled by it, to be perfectly honest. When I read it, I was like, wow, I don't know what to do. And I it's been a while since I've read it, and I've been sitting with it and trying to figure out what I feel about all of it.
Yeah. And then at the same time, the other two wizards got over it immediately.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, huh, I was a bit unsettled there, but little candied people.
Well, that's at least Xaxus is being like, look at these. You know, like he's being his weird, you know, childish self. Valevna, I think, seemed also unsettled. So after the dinner, Gav was pacing in his room trying to figure out what to do. He hadn't really thought any of this through, and he had been foolishly hoping that he would have figured out some magical way out of this, or that there would be a hero who would come in and take Zarconar down for him so that he wouldn't have to do anything. But he realized that that was a cowardly and frankly stupid line of thought. That isn't going to happen. In the real world, there is not usually some magic fix for stuff. In the real world and in his world, if he wanted something to be done, he needed to do it. So he started to go into like this spiral of wallowing in despair. And then he was like, you know what? No, I don't have to give into this. I'm going to get out of this, or I'm going to die trying. Maybe. So he goes to Eliasha's cell, where he finds the princess and the rooster Fiari somewhat conspiring. They've moved Fiari into her cell for this, just to like keep an extra eye on her. And both Eliasha and Fiari are very, very judgy when Gav comes into the room, saying that they heard the chaos from their cell, and they were criticizing Gav for not doing anything to stop it. Eliasha sat primly on her pallet, ring on, and her princess guise firmly in place. No trace of Wren's practical clothing. She did not look particularly happy to see him. Fiari fluffed up his feathers in indignation at his arrival. Gav took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy. He had the sneaking suspicion that the words he was about to say he had never said before in his life. Back from playing evil with the rest of your evil friends? Her voice was cold. She cut him off. I should have known better than to trust you. I helped you despite my best instincts, but you haven't changed at all, have you? She clearly brooded herself up into a state, and he had no idea what set her off. He took a guess. I'm sorry you're still in the cell. I swear, I'm trying to figure out a way to get you out of here. But we can't have you wandering around where they can catch you, or I don't know what. You think I'm upset about being in this cell? She laughed once, a harsh, incredulous bark. No, he said hesitantly. We heard the scream, Gavrax, she said flatly. We heard the guards gossiping. You make a huge deal over how relieved you are to have not burned a few specific people to death. And then the same evening, you burned someone to death. I did not, he said hotly. His fingers twitched, the beginnings of the flames of rage making his fingertips tingle. That was Zarconar. Did you stop him? No. The rage curdled inside him. I didn't. She was right. It wasn't Eliasha he was mad at. So are you a hypocrite or just a coward? He would have liked to see her do better, he thought viciously. And then he realized she would have. She would have stood up to Zarconar, even if it had meant her death. He would never be her equal. He closed his eyes, took another deep breath. He wasn't a hero, and he'd failed again. But that didn't mean he couldn't keep trying. So he could look himself in the eye, even if no one else could. He'd come here with something to say. He would say it, and hope she didn't throw it back in his face. I'm sorry, he said. Her mouth had been open, ready to lash out at him again. She paused. You're right, and I'm sorry. The looks on their faces were comical. He hadn't even known roosters could look surprised. He realized, startled, that he felt more comfortable in this room surrounded by people who should be his enemies than he had all through the dinner with his allies. What exactly are you apologizing for? And what exactly was I right about? She finally asked. He hadn't expected she would demand an itemized list. Everything? She folded her arms. It doesn't count if you don't know. Fiari's head turned back and forth with each volley, his waddle wobbling each time. Gav blew out a breath. You were right that intent matters. You were right that it doesn't really matter why Gavrax acted like he did. If I want to be better, I need to do better. And the fact is, I've been a hypocrite and a coward. And I'm sorry that I got you into this mess to begin with, and I'm sorry that I don't know how to get you out. I see. Her tone was dangerously bland. I don't know what I'm doing, he confessed. So I've come to the only actual strategy expert I know in hopes that she might be wise enough to rescue me from my folly. She blinked at that and then blushed slightly. It was the only compliment that might have had that effect, he suspected. Gods, she was magnificent, with or without the glamour. If only he shook it off. She had recovered some of her aplomb. So, let's review what we know. Zarconar is summoning an ancient god. Somehow I'm involved in the ritual, most likely as a sacrifice. We can't figure out how to get me away from the ritual, so we'll need a way of disrupting it. Without it backlashing and killing us all. Yes, that. She took a breath through her nose. So, that remains the next step. What, figuring out the ritual? He gave a bleak little laugh. Because that's gone so well so far. But that was while Zarconar was far off in his stronghold somewhere, she said slowly. Now he's here. And that's supposed to make things better? More dangerous, certainly, but maybe more possible, she said, her forehead creased in thought. Tell me, teacher, why do you have so many scrolls instead of memorizing them? Besides the obvious current difficulties, that is. He tried to calm his heart, which had started to race as soon as they started talking about Zarconar.
Because rituals require extremely precise steps. Done perfectly. Almost no one wants to trust their memory absolutely, especially for the parts that have to be done in a timed sequence. It's too risky.
She nodded. Which means... He had a sinking feeling that he knew where she was going with this.
That he most likely has the ritual written down, and that he must have brought it with him.
So if we're lucky, the knowledge we need is right here in the castle, she said.
If we're lucky,
he snapped.
And even if he does have it here, it will be under so many wards that it might as well be on the moon.
I will go, said a voice from the floor. They both looked down at the rooster in surprise. For a moment, Gav had honestly forgotten that he was there. Fiari puffed up his breast, the mangy feathers fluffing. That's where this is going, isn't it? You need someone to sneak into his rooms. You need a hero. There's only one hero in this room.
You're a chicken,
Gav pointed out. Rooster, thank you. And I still have the heart of a hero, Fiari insisted with as much dignity as he could. Another feather, loosened by all the fluffing, chose that moment to drift to the floor. You're still an idiot, snapped Eliasha. You couldn't outwit Gav here, and he didn't even have a working memory. How are you expecting to get in? Fiari's comb drooped a bit, but he mustered on. Because he won't have a ward against chickens. Roosters, she muttered.
I love that. He was making a big deal about, I'm a rooster, not a chicken. And then he immediately goes, I'm a chicken.
Yes. He'd known he'd liked her for a reason, and he wanted her to stop looking at him with so much contempt. Maybe not with no contempt, that seemed too much to hope for. And he wanted her help. He needed to earn it.
We don't need a hero, he said slowly. We had a hero earlier this evening.
Eliasha's lips pressed together, remembering the screaming.
Heroes aren't going to stand up against Zarconar. He's too powerful, he said. Our Tharnos equipped heroes, and they've all failed. We need someone else.
She looked at him with something that might have been dawning respect. He straightened up.
You're right. Someone does need to sneak into his quarters, he said, fighting the nausea at the thought of what he was proposing. And Fiari's right, as much as I hate to admit it. It needs to be someone he won't expect. And right now, he thinks I'm a coward. I'm the last one he'd expect. But how I'm going to get in there without him noticing is beyond me.
Eliasha pursed her lips. A diversion would help.
You could try to escape,
Fiari suggested. Eliasha shivered at the memory of her last attempt to leave the castle, then straightened her shoulders. If I must.
No. Wait.
They both looked at him.
We have one more potential ally.
Okay, so the scene does continue, but like it switches off. So I was wondering, do you want to stop here and talk, and then I can read the next part of the scene, or do you want to wait till I'm done with the entire scene?
I'm going to speculate.
Okay.
I've forgotten the person's name.
Valevna?
Yes. I think he's grabbing Valevna.
He is.
Okay.
Is that all you, like, is there anything else that you want to say about it? Or do you want to wait till the end?
No, I think I said what I wanted to say while it was coming up.
Okay. Yeah, I did find it interesting, but I guess I'm going to wait till the end because that's where my notes are. So, he hardly expected to run into anyone, cutting through the kitchen in the middle of the night. He had wanted to avoid even passing the throne room door, so the two shapes huddled on a bench in the front of the fire startled him. He paused, afraid to make a noise and call attention to himself. One of the shape's shoulders were shaking. The other reached out a tentative claw and stroked her back.
Didn't even touch it, cried Orla. Not a bite. My one big chance and I botched it. Do you know how long I've waited for this? 6 different masters. 6! And one finally trusts me to do a feast and actually has guests and doesn't murder any of the guests at all, and I can't manage to produce a single thing they'll eat.
I know, murmured the other goblin.
He let me wear an apron,
Orla wailed, but very softly so as not to wake anyone.
I could have been a real chef, like in a real castle. I was gonna suggest we do a tea.
She buried her head in her claws. He couldn't bear it.
A tea would be very nice, Orla.
The goblins gasped and whirled around.
Master!
Orla threw herself to her knees.
Orla's so sorry, Master. So terribly sorry.
He bent and tried to draw her to her feet.
It's all right, Orla. You tried. It was a complete failure.
She threw her apron over her head. He patted her shoulder ineffectually.
Orla, I don't think anyone would have eaten anything, even if Barabino's head chef spent a week preparing and the whole castle's annual budget. Besides, the little flaming people were brilliant.
She froze. One inky eye peered out from under her misshapen kitten.
Really? Really? Xaxus decapitated at least 6.
A thought suddenly occurred to him.
Orla, what happened to your accent?
Orla and the other goblin froze.
What master mean? Accent?
She said, her voice suddenly roughened. He rubbed his forehead. He didn't need this right now. He regretted even asking.
You know what I meant. A minute ago you were speaking...
How could he put it without being insulting?
More like me.
Orla looked back and forth, panicked. There was nothing in the darkened kitchen to save her.
Orla not understand. Goblins not talk good like humans.
Except you just did. Was he losing his mind?
Again?
I just heard you. What's with the act?
He looked down at the trembling cook and up at the endlessly burning torches.
You talk that way because I expect you to talk that way.
Orla looked up hesitantly.
Master not mad?
If I promise not to be mad, will you talk like not a normal person you usually do? When humans aren't around, I mean.
If that's what you would prefer, she said slowly.
The realizations kept coming, all of them distracting him from what he actually needed to be doing.
So everyone is faking it. Grr, Beetle. Throck.
Despite herself, she snorted.
No, our Throck really is that dim. Grr, Beetle worships him and imitates him. I have to smack that boy upside the head.
If Throck's that dumb, why is he captain?
She looked at him. What smart goblin would take that job?
Ah, that's fair.
Her shoulders fell again, and then she straightened them. I'm ready, my lord.
You know tomorrow is a big day, right?
She nodded. 6 masters, she'd said. She was probably used to massive rituals by now.
Look, if things go well, or even just all right, and somehow we don't all die horribly, we'll plan a real feast, you and me, and we'll invite just people we actually like, and they'll eat. And maybe nobody will die at all.
I did enjoy that.
And
maybe nobody will die at all. Just maybe, though.
Her eyes were wide as she looked up at him in the way that felt almost worshipful. It made him terribly uncomfortable. This is what he'd been looking for, he suddenly realized. That adoration. But adoration for promising something that he was fairly certain he couldn't deliver just felt wrong.
But right now I have to go, all right?
She nodded, staring after him as he backed his way out, nearly stumbling over a bench. It gave him a lot to think about as he knocked on Valevna's door, none of which he actually had time to think about. So, this scene intrigues me, first because Orla is my girl, and first and foremost, how dare Zarconar? I'm not even gonna correct myself for saying his name wrong. How dare he treat her like that? You cannot just come to this place and not touch a single thing that she worked so fucking hard to make for you. How dare you? You know, it's fucking rude. Okay, but going back into that conversation about what was going on with Eliasha, because that's where the rest of my notes are. I do find it interesting that Eliasha is still on her fucking high horse and her holier-than-thou crusade, even when she's been humbled several times by her own biases being pointed out to her. And it's clear that Gav has been trying. And so it's frustrating to me to watch her just continuously beat Gav down and be like, you're not trying hard enough. And it's like, I don't know. It's kind of, on the one hand, I don't think that we should necessarily be praising people for doing the bare minimum, which is kind of what Gav's doing, is like the bare minimum of being a good person and whatever. But on the other hand, I feel like if you're too harsh and you keep moving the bar of that expectation, people are going to find it easier to just be the asshole, or in this case, to just be the villain, you know? And so it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't necessarily disagree with the things that she's been saying to him, but at the same time, I'm like, why are you being so hard on him?
Yeah, I don't know. Especially when it was like, you don't know how powerful this guy is.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, did you do anything to try to stop him? And it's like, I don't know how Gav dying would help you at all, Eliasha, other than like, oh, you can be like, oh, he was so noble. Like, that's not helpful. You know, it's like, just because he is doing things out of self-preservation doesn't mean that he's being selfish. And I don't know, I just thought it was such a weird, him wanting to make decisions that benefit him while also trying to undo the like bad things. I don't know. I don't think that necessarily makes him a bad person. And I'm frustrated at her like very black and white view of things as like, you're either a good person or a bad person. And like, she seems to think that there is nothing that he can do to be a good person, which then I'm like, then why, like, what's the point of this then? Like, because like, I feel like that would make her a hypocrite then though, because like, if she's thinking that he can't ever do anything to redeem himself, that he's not worthy of any of like anything, but then she goes on and helps him too. So like, I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure either. But I did notice one thing is I think she genuinely likes the rooster guy.
Fiari?
I think she genuinely likes Fiari.
Why do you say that?
Mostly because I don't think this author wants Gav and...
Eliasha? The princess?
Yeah, I don't know why I literally forgot her name while saying it. I don't think the author wants Gav and Eliasha to be together. And it's kind of giving us opportunities where her and the chicken are together and they're like, oh, I believe you. You're just good. You're just overall good and you're willing to sacrifice all the time. Kind of shows like she's been around this kind of thing her whole life. Like the hero just does it and dies, which has been shown several times by having these like teenagers show up and just get killed every time. It's ridiculous.
I am starting to wonder because there are all of these conversations, whether it's this conversation with Orla in the kitchen or if it's between Eliasha and Gav or Gav and Valevna, like literally the conversation that's been repeated a million times in this book so far is it looks menacing, therefore it is menacing, or it looks a certain way and people have certain expectations. And so then that's just what it is, even if that's not the entire thing. And so I'm starting to wonder more and more if this ritual has this very dark, ominous appearance, but I'm wondering if it's actually something rather harmless. I don't think so, given that Zarconar so far has shown himself to be this harmful force. But I find it interesting how much Eliasha and everyone seems to harp on what Gav's doing, when Zarconar very clearly appears to be worse. And like, on the one hand, again, it doesn't justify Gav for all of the bad things he's done. It doesn't excuse him from the bad things that he's done. But I'm like, literally, why are you nitpicking his trying to do good when Zarconar is right over there doing some really horrible shit? Like, you can be like, I appreciate what you're doing, Gav. I think you could be doing more. But like, I mean, like the fact that there's just like no recognition. And again, should we be praising people for doing the minimum? Probably not. But I don't know. It's weird because I'm like, Zarconar's right fucking there and he's doing some horrible fucking things. And Gav is trying, maybe not as hard as you would like him to be, but like he is trying. I don't know. If we're going to be mad about bad deeds, why not start with the big bad?
Yeah.
And work our way up from there. Like, I feel like people's priorities are so...
Yeah, because it's like, he's trying to help you out.
Yeah.
He wants you to live.
And
but you're making it hard for him every step of the way.
And I get that it's hard for them to trust him because of who he used to be. But still, I'm like...
Gav doesn't have to be helping at all. He could just follow whatever Zarconar says and he'd probably be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he would feel very guilty the whole time because that seems to be who he is now, but he's doing more than... I don't think he's just doing the bare minimum. I think he is trying really hard. And could he be trying harder? Sure, but like, I don't know. I'm very confused by it. Anyways... Gav goes and talks to Valevna, and the conversation he has with her is very similar to the conversation that he had with Eliasha, so I'm not going to repeat it, but basically he's like, I think that Zarconar has the ritual written down, and I think we need to get it so that we know what we're up against. I don't think Zarconar will have thought to ward against any of us, but we do need to distract him so that we can get to it. And honestly, Valevna, you're hella distracting. So if you wouldn't mind whoring your way over to him, that would be super appreciated. And Valevna agreed that, yes, a distraction would be good and that they should know what they're dealing with, so they need to get the ritual. But she countered that Zarconar is not as stupid as her usual targets and would be ready for her to make some kind of an advance. So she was like, that's really risky. However, she brought up that Zarconar is very concerned about the princess's purity.
Oh.
And it's pretty obvious that Gav has taken a liking to the princess. So Valevna is like, well, what if I just insinuate that she's no longer a virgin? I think that could get Zarconar out of the room fast enough for him to do some kind of magical test to see if she's still a virgin or not. They'll find she's still a virgin. My concerns were warranted, but, you know, luckily not real, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I don't look like an idiot in front of Zarconar. And you know, he still has his mistrust of you and all that, whatever, but like, it's fine and stuff. And like, Gav's like, that's actually probably a really smart idea. Eliasha's not going to be super thrilled to have her virginity questioned, but I guess we'll just fucking deal with that. And so he was hesitant, but he agreed that that's probably the safest option for how to get this. So Valevna was going to go distract Zarconar with this debacle about Eliasha's virginity, and Gav went to find the ritual. There had been more than one advantage to putting Zarconar in the audience chamber, aside from appealing to his sense of superiority. Of all the rooms in the palace, the audience chamber was the one in which Gavrax had put the most effort into making people believe he belonged in. Intentions mattered in magic. Gav wasn't sure Zarconar ever needed to put that much effort into trying to get people to believe him. Zarconar was scary as a fact of being rather than a carefully maintained facade. Or at least Zarconar's facade was better constructed than Gavrax could ever dream of. Zarconar had built terrifyingly solid wards to let him know if anything entered the room that didn't belong. What Gav had to do was convince the room itself that he was part of it, to the extent that the room would convince the wards. He gathered the scraps he would need, each of them a blow to his dignity. He put on the robes with the flames, which Grrr Beetle had stubbornly kept. They were rather bedraggled. He grabbed one of the thrice-damned torches. He stopped by the workshop long enough to lop off the tip of a squid tentacle. He was part of the facade that the castle had been built to maintain. He was part of the castle. He was a shadow cast by the torches, a figment. Nothing that would count as an intruder. He belonged here, and everything that belonged here was below notice. He burned the squid tentacle in the torch, using the ashy grease to coat his face and arms. He took a deep breath. Elsewhere in the castle, Valevna was leading Zarconar up to the princess's cell to test whether she still met the requirements of the spell. It was time. So, Gav basically sneaks into Zarconar's chambers, and he very delicately kind of moves through the space, trying to figure out, okay, if I were Zarconar, where would I hide this bitch? There's not a lot of furniture in here. There's not a lot of, actual places to hide something, but he finds a panel in the dais and is like, oh, that looks strange that that's there. And so he finds that that is a secret compartment, and in that compartment there's some papers and there's a little jar of stuff, and he's like, let me look at the papers, and he casts a spell to copy the papers because he's like, I can't remove them from here because if Zarconar comes back and is like, where the fuck are those? He's gonna know to ask, the wizards first, or he's gonna go looking for them first. So he's like, I'm just gonna have to hope that he didn't enchant these to be able to tell if they've been moved and stuff like that. But he makes these little copies of them, and then he considers the jar, and he's like, I wonder what that is. And then he starts thinking, maybe those are my memories. But why would Zarconar bring my memories here? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
I just had a thought. How to do the ritual is in the memory sands. And it's not written down anywhere. You have to eat the memory to know how to do it.
Maybe.
And this whole thing was an elaborate ruse to get Gav to pay the price to figure out how to do the ritual and then just steal his memories and do the ritual off of his memories. That's the thought I just had.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree. I don't disagree necessarily, but I don't think that makes a lot of sense. Why wouldn't Zarconar do that to himself then?
He doesn't want to get rid of his own memories. That's dangerous.
I guess. Okay, so he goes and he sees that there's this jar that he's like, I bet that those are my memories. And then he has to come to terms with, does he want to take those? He's like, again, I can't necessarily take them out of the room without Zarconar noticing. And I don't even know for sure that those are my memories, but I can't think of what else they would be. Other than maybe some part of the ritual, some other component, but I doubt it. I think that those are my memories. And he goes through this point of trying to figure out, is this just another test? And he has to think, do I even want these memories back? And there's a big part of him that does, because he wants to know, just for clarity and certainty's sake, to know how horrible he was. And he thinks about how maybe if he could identify where these horrible emotions come from and where this line of thinking was, maybe there's some backstory that he can be not necessarily excused but justified for why he is the way that he is and all that kind of stuff. He's like, it would help to know. But on the other hand, what if there was no justification? What if he was just horrible, And he's like, I don't want to know why I was so horrible because I don't, does that help anything? I don't know. And so he thinks about it and he ends up leaving the jar there and he stuffs the papers back in there and makes it so that he was never there. And then he runs back to Eliasha's cell. Ears straining, he finished the rest of the sheets and tucked the copies back into his belt pouch. He carefully slipped the pages back where they had been. But what was in the canister? He paused. Still no footsteps. Did he dare take a moment to satisfy his curiosity? Then again, if it was something important enough for Zarconar to try to hide, could he afford not to? He pulled the jar out, opened it with shaking hands, barely daring to hope. It was full of coarse powder. No, it couldn't be. But then, why not? How much easier to taunt Gav with his memories, or cajole him, or threaten him if Zarconar brought them with him? Unless they weren't real. A decoy, perhaps, but then why hide them? Echoing down the stairs came the sounds of feet, the murmur of Valevna's voice. He had a few seconds as they finished coming down the spiral stone stairs to put the wooden rectangle back in place and get out. Take the memories or leave them. He wanted them so badly that his teeth ached. They would hurt, he realized that now. Whatever past had created a man like Gavrax, it could not have been pleasant. Even the things Gavrax would have considered pleasant, Gav was not sure he could enjoy. But he would understand. He'd know who he had really been. If there was some justification for Gavrax's rage, maybe, if he knew what laid down those channels in the first place, those patterns of thought, it would be easier to carve new ones. And that was worth anything. Almost anything. Because if the jar was missing, Zarconar would know. How big of a problem would that be? It would depend on what was written on those papers, on whether they would need to surprise him, on how angry he would be to be thwarted. Gav could take the memories and run, of course, maybe steal Valevna's carpet. It was everything he'd originally wanted. This whole stealing the papers thing had always been a long shot, and there was no guarantee it would help. Who was he kidding? Eliasha was never going to forgive him, no matter what he told her. What did he owe them, really? He'd never get this chance again. If someone unlocked her collar, would she even give him a second thought before she fled? He was so tired of the indecision. Was he really going to give up his only chance to find some certainty for the sake of people? A woman who would always hate him no matter how hard he tried? The footsteps were closer. Now or never. With a grimace, he shoved the jar back. The wood caught for a moment as he tried to put it back. He nearly dropped it. Somehow, he wedged it back in place. Back across the floor, as quickly as he could run on soft feet, he slipped out of the door, closing it softly. They were nearly at the bottom of the spiral stairs. 3 steps to an alcove. He pressed himself into the shadow, sucked in his gut, held his breath ridiculously. The doors opened. Footsteps went in. The doors closed. Footsteps, presumably Valevna's, led away. There was no outcry. He waited, wondering if Zarconar would check on his hidey hole. He couldn't hear anything. How long should he wait? It would be better not to be here at all, if the disturbance were discovered. Could he blame it on another hero? He crept away, a burglar in his own home, back up the stairs. He didn't start to breathe normally until he was halfway back to the cell. Why hadn't he taken the jar of memories? Was it courage or cowardice? Did he think he was some kind of hero? He'd seen how heroes ended. Who did he think he was, anyways? It wasn't like he was ever going to know now. He'd wanted to tell her, he realized. He still wanted to find that there was some justification for Gavrax's actions, a suitably tragic backstory he could lay at Eliasha's feet so she could understand him and pity him and maybe forgive him. Because if she couldn't forgive him, how could he forgive himself? Because maybe there had been an excuse. Maybe once upon a time, he'd been a sweet and innocent kid. Everyone had been innocent once, right? And something terrible had happened. Or maybe things that explained everything. And then all he had to do was find his way back. And then he could move forward. But what if the justifications Gavrax had had for acting the way that he did were just that, justifications? What if he found, in the memories, didn't make things better but worse? He was a coward, he decided. He just wasn't sure if he was afraid of Zarconar or himself. Back down the hall to the cell. Just checking on things, he said vaguely to the guards and shut the door behind him. Well, she'd been pacing from the looks of things. I found something, he started. How mad was she? Are you all right? That's on the list of things you don't have a right to ask about right now. She spat. She was mad. What did you find? I'm not sure, he had to admit, grateful for the subject change. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. He took the handful of crumpled papers from his belt pouch and smoothed them out. The faint text was not easy to make out, and the handwriting had not been the clearest to begin with. Well, she asked. Give me a minute, he snapped, and bring the lantern closer. He puzzled through, narrating as he went. All right, so the first part describes the diagram we'll need to lay out on the floor. Chalk, that's good. Chalk? As opposed to what? Fiari asked. Blood, Eliasha said flatly. She'd had time to read at least some of the spells she'd organized for him, it sounded like. Diagram. That's a lot of diagram. Looks like it'll take a good chunk of the afternoon to draw this properly. What if you don't draw it properly? Asked Eliasha. What if you, or we, make a mistake or two? On purpose. Gav was getting to that part. He winced as he finally got enough of a toehold on the topic for bits of his memory to kick in. Ooh, we do not want to do that. No? He looked her straight in the eye, willing her to believe him. Not that she had a lot of reason to, but if she didn't, they were all going to die a horrible, horrible death. Because the diagram is the part that protects us. The summoning chant directs who we want to call, the sacrifice ensures the summoned will do our bidding,
but the diagram is what keeps what we summoned from not doing our bidding.
What would it do instead?
Well, in this case, we're trying to raise, I'm not saying its name, one of the ancient gods of the outer darkness. And what he would like to do, from what anyone knows, is rip through all of this reality and devour as much of it as he possibly can.
Oh.
She looked suitably chastened. Not just the people who summoned him, Gav continued, looking at both of them.
It was really important that they understand this part. He did not need a would-be hero deciding that it would be no great loss if a few dark wizards lost their souls.
Depending on how much leeway the incorrect diagram gives, he might tear a hole in the fabric of reality the size of the room, or the castle, or maybe even the surrounding kingdom if he gets enough momentum going.
What do you mean a hole? Eliasha asked, looking unsure as to whether to think he was being hyperbolic.
I mean that instead of the castle, there's a giant black gaping maw that attempts to suck in anything that gets near it until reality manages to patch itself back together, Gav said, and shivered. And when it does, it's like someone sewed the edges of a hole in on the piece of fabric shut. It's uneven and it puckers a bit, and if you start on one side, you suddenly skip over to the other side, and whatever used to be in the middle is gone. Some people think that the weirder edges of the world are places where reality healed itself.
Like the Ilaret Forest, or the Great Swamp,
Fiari ventured. Gav shrugged. He wasn't sure what either of those were. Might be. It's not like anyone who was there would still be there afterwards to explain to people.
Right, Eliasha said. Make sure the diagrams are correct. What's next?
Gav looked back at the papers. Next, there are the anchor points. Looks like there are 3. The Tears of a Dragon, the Silence of a Monk, and the, Seed of one of the lesser demons.
So where are you supposed to get those? Eliasha asked. It's not like there are any dragons around.
Gav shook his head. We already have them, or at least I presume we do. Xaxus' assignment was to retrieve dragon tears. Valevna got the,
He realized he was blushing. She charmed a demon? Eliasha asked.
She would.
How do you get the silence of a monk? Fiari wondered. Gav found the answer popped into his mind.
I'm assuming that one was Zarconar. There are ways to draw off an essential quality of a person. They're not nice.
It was Eliasha's turn to shiver. No, they wouldn't be. Gav didn't want to think about it too hard.
So, at sunset on the night of the new moon, the essences of the 3 anchor points are poured onto the specific places in the diagram, each by a wizard. The 4th stands in the center with... He stopped, regretting that he'd begun reading this out loud. He should have read it in his room first.
With?
Eliasha prompted.
Gav made himself continue.
With a virgin of royal blood.
She nodded. We knew I had to be somewhere in there. Then what?
He swallowed. Then we recite the incantation, and no, I'm not saying a single word of it right now.
She nodded, looking pale. This was the part he hadn't wanted to say.
But in it, he promises that, as a sacrifice, he will spill her blood.
Fiari closed his eyes. Eliasha, though, looked at him intently. What exactly does that mean? Would a finger prick work? Or is he planning to cut my throat? If I could manage to avoid dying, would that keep the spell from being completed? Or are we doomed if he manages to spill so much as a drop? Gav fumbled with the papers. He hadn't actually thought beyond the spills the blood part and had rather expected her to be caught up short by that bit too. He should have known she was made of stronger and more thoughtful stuff.
Heart's own blood. Looks like he has to stab you in the heart.
Not just a little then, Fiari clucked grimly. I don't know if that's good or bad, Eliasha said, leaning back.
How is that anything but bad? Fiari exclaimed, his feathers fluffing out.
Well, obviously it would have been nice if the spell hadn't required my death, Eliasha said, but it's not like Zarconar was likely to send me toddling home when this was all done anyways. And if it requires heart stabbings, they can't set off the spell by accident if I get a splinter.
We have 3 pages of diagrams and another 2 of things to chant, Gav said. There's no way to set this thing off accidentally.
But if someone, say, pushed me at the right moment and I just got scratched instead of stabbed, we wouldn't end up with my life being saved but the gateway opening anyway, Eliasha pointed out.
No, we'd have the gate open, but a very cranky dark god not getting his promised sacrifice, Gav said. And no one in that room is going to have a good day after that.
What happens next? Eliasha asked.
What does it matter? Fiari demanded.
I don't know if it matters, Eliasha said. That's why I want to know.
Then... Together, the 3 outer wizards extend one hand into the circle. Then? The other 2 prompted. That's it, said Gav, looking up from the papers helplessly. That's all the pages.
You forgot to copy the last page? Fiari made a rude noise with his beak.
I didn't forget to copy the last page, Gav replied acidly.
He wondered if he kicked the rooster how far he'd fly. Not very, the walls of the cell were too close. Smashing into a wall would be all right too, though.
That's all the pages that were there, Zarconar must have kept the last page somewhere else, maybe on himself.
So no one can do the spell without him, said Fiari. He might even have it memorized, said Eliasha, if it's short enough. It might not even be here at all.
Does it matter? Gav echoed. The order of this kind of thing is always the same. There's the summoning and the binding circle, and that's all the components and the chanting and hand bits. And then there's the sacrifice. The last part will be the bargaining and the dismissing. The dismissing step would be nice to have, but if he shows up having been promised a royal virgin sacrifice, the dismissal won't work until he has his sacrifice. We know enough. It doesn't matter what happens in the last part if we know we have to keep the sacrifice step from happening at all.
Why do you care? Fiari asked. You kidnapped her in the first place. You had to have known what was going to happen.
Gavrax kidnapped her, Gav pointed out, and he might not have known.
You're Gavrax, Fiari said, rolling his eyes, and you should have at least guessed.
I don't know what Gavrax knew, Gav insisted, but I didn't know, and now I do know, and I don't want to do it.
And why should we believe you? The rooster demanded, his wobbling comb undercutting his challenge.
I'm here, aren't I? Gav said, exasperated. Why would I bother even talking to you at all?
To fool us into a false sense of security, Fiari crowed. Literally.
That, Gav rubbed his nose, that doesn't make any sense.
None of it matters unless we have a plan, Eliasha said quietly. This goes beyond me. How are we going to stop them?
We can't tamper with the diagram, said Gav.
Could we tamper with the spell components? Eliasha asked.
Are they about to bang?
I don't know. I lost my spot because I got nervous when you lifted your hand and now I can't find where I am. Okay, there we are. Could we tamper with the spell components? Eliasha asked.
I only have access to one of them, Gav pointed out.
Well, I can't become less royal, Eliasha said, staring at her hands. She looked up. I could stop being a virgin, though.
No! Fiari snapped. No, we're not considering that!
It's better than letting them succeed, Eliasha pressed on. Gav ran through the list of possibilities for people who could help Eliasha with that particular condition. Fiari was a rooster. The other two wizards couldn't be asked, and neither could their respective retinues. If they weren't interested in opposing Zarconar, neither Valevna nor Xaxus would be willing to help here. Sirocco had turned out to not be as bad as he'd thought, but if he wasn't interested in women, there was a question of whether he'd be able to help even if he consented. He didn't really see the goblins having much appeal. There was a village full of people outside the walls, but he didn't think much of his chances of smuggling one in. For once in his life, he was at the top of that list. His stomach soured. Even if it started as her idea, it was still not the same as her actively wanting him. Gavrax might have enjoyed it. The thought made Gav sick. He shook his head.
It doesn't really matter. They've already done the test to make sure you're a virgin, so it's not like it would stop them in advance. They won't know otherwise until this spell fails, and then you're already dead.
But the spell would fail, Eliasha repeated.
Well, yes, said Gav, but you'd be dead.
That might be worth it, she said.
No!
Gav and Fiari said together. They exchanged a glance. We'll figure something out, Fiari said. She slumped a little. He hadn't even realized how rigid she'd been holding herself. I guess it doesn't matter. Even if the demon decided it didn't count as a sacrifice and got angry and refused their bargain, having an angry demon who can't go home probably isn't great for reality anyway.
I can't go up against them ahead of time, Gav confessed. I'm just not strong enough.
But they need 4 wizards in total to cast the spell, she pointed out. If you chicken out, can they still cast?
Rooster!
Fiari interjected automatically. They both looked at him.
Oh, I see what happened now. I was like, why did he yell rooster? Oh, because the word chicken was said. Yep. See, I'm paying attention.
Rooster!
Fiari interjected automatically. They both looked at him. Oh, carry on.
Not unless they got a replacement, Gav said slowly. And I doubt they could do it on such short notice. They'd have to wait a month. And in the interim, maybe Artharno or some of her heroes might come up with a plan that actually works.
There you go, Fiari said, shaking his feathers. What will they do to you if you refuse? Eliasha asked after a moment's pause.
Kill me. Probably very painfully, Gav said.
He swallowed. He wasn't sure he was brave enough to sacrifice himself. He wasn't sure he wanted to be brave enough. Eliasha shook her head. So that won't work either. Fiari made a rude noise. Gav closed his eyes in relief. What if he just disappeared? Left entirely? He wanted to. Oh, he wanted to. But if he wasn't brave enough to stand up to Zarconar, he also wasn't enough of a coward to flee.
Honestly, Zarconar would probably hunt me down as an example. But even if he didn't, there's the castle staff and the villagers. Even if Zarconar doesn't take his rage out on them, there's no telling how many the heroes will slaughter on their way in. This has to end tomorrow, before Artharno blows up the castle or something.
What about the others? She asked.
Xaxus and Valevna? Xaxus, I don't think anything will sway him. I don't think consequences really bother him as long as he can satisfy his curiosity. I think maybe he would be willing to let the entire world end if it meant he could find out how it worked.
And Valevna?
He thought, maybe. She's got a healthy sense of self-preservation. And the missing page. It might be missing because he doesn't want us to be able to cast it by ourselves, but it might also be missing because he doesn't want us to know something.
How hard was it to get the spell?
Very. He remembered how terrifying the entire ordeal had been. And then he thought, not hard enough, was it?
Eliasha nodded. Talk to her. Emphasize that. There's something he's not telling you. Maybe only the central wizard gets to keep the power.
That would be like Zarconar, he admitted. I need to talk to her anyway. She's going to want to know what I found.
Let her come to that conclusion herself, if you can, Eliasha suggested. Give her hints, but don't tell her outright. People are more willing to believe what they thought of themselves.
Which is exactly what Zarconar is counting on, isn't he?
Gav stared at his hands. Played again. Meanwhile, we'll keep thinking, all of us, Eliasha said. You need to get moving before Valevna gets suspicious. He nodded, standing. Then he paused.
Tell me something, he said. When Fiari suggested that I go the suicidal hero route, why did you turn him down? That's what I'm supposed to do here, to prove I've changed, isn't it?
The wall appeared to be of great interest, given how she suddenly found a need to study it. Her fingers smoothed her gown against her thighs, seemingly without thinking about it. I don't actually wish for your death.
Why not?
That old self-destructive impulse, knowing it would hurt but needing it anyways.
Because I'm not you,
she snapped, pushed back into the rote responses they both knew were expected of her. He'd hoped for better. So had she, from the faint flush on her cheeks. Fiari, on the other hand, clucked contentedly to himself, enjoying the show.
If I'd been a good person, he said slowly, a person you'd liked, and suddenly I didn't remember you, or who I was, or anything anymore, and I stopped acting like the person you knew and stopped even wanting to be that person you knew, would you say that person was still alive? If I suddenly started doing evil things, would you blame the old me? Or would you say the person you loved was gone and you were free to hate this new person?
You can't complain about paying for his mistakes when you're still enjoying his advantages, she said with a sigh. You're hardly out on the road without a penny to your name. You have a village, a reputation that makes people cower in fear, even your powers. You want it all by selfishly clawing through anyone in your way. You can claim not to be evil now, but if you hadn't been evil, you would be nothing. He swallowed.
What would it take?
Her shoulders slumped a little as the fight drained out of her. I'll believe that you're not him when you stop enjoying what he got by hurting people. Gavrax is a dark wizard, dread lord of a mighty fortress, and commander of fell powers. I don't know who Gav is, but he isn't anyone, and he doesn't have anything. So who do you want to be? Because right now, you're an imposter who wants credit for not actually being who you're impersonating. He didn't have much to say to that. Eliasha gestured to the door. Go on. See if you can convince Valevna. She didn't believe he could, he realized. She'd already written off the entire night as a failure. His big, brave gesture, and it was as incompetent as everything else he'd done. The worst part was, Eliasha wasn't even really disappointed. She'd never expected him to succeed. And that's where I think we're going to stop.
Not sure how I feel about that scene.
I know, that's why I included it. I just thought it was really interesting that, first and foremost, I do feel like in these last couple of chapters, there have been these moments of like the writing style changing a little bit, and I don't know how to explain it or like even where to point it out, but it was in that scene. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something different about the writing in it.
I think this last couple chapters held more self-doubt, and I think it's being reflected in how things are written.
Mm-hmm. You want to know my prediction?
Sure.
So we're all assuming that Zarconar wants some power, right? He wants to summon this god for unlimited power or whatever. But Gav was responsible for getting the princess, while Valevna was responsible for getting the demon seed, Xaxus the dragon tears, and Zarconar the silence of a monk. So why was Gav tasked with getting the main part of the spell, like the main sacrifice of the spell? I'm wondering if Gav is going to be the one in the center and the other three are like on the outside, like, you know, whatever. And so I wonder if Gav is the one who's supposed to kill Eliasha, like stab her in the heart.
Maybe.
Because why would everyone else be, I'm assuming, responsible for their own piece? And then Gav and Zarconar switch what pieces they brought, basically.
I mean, yeah, I can kind of see that, but in my head, I'm just making excuses like, well, Gav was just the closest. And then the thought that crossed my mind is, what if they pull a fast one and it was actually all Gav's idea?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. And I'm wondering if this was all Gav's idea and Zarconar stole it or something and then stole his memories to make it seem like he was always the one that was in charge.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fun twist. But the way it's set up right now, I thought this last conversation, like he was angling towards, I'm going to go get my memories real quick.
Really?
Yeah. Would you believe that who I am right now still existed, even if they were different?
Yeah, that's one of the parts that I know like struck me as interesting about like the writing style was kind of different. And I thought that conversation there too, I think I need to sit with that a little bit longer, because like that is such a weird conversation of like, if I'd been a good person, a person you'd liked, and suddenly I didn't remember who you or who I was or anything anymore, and I stopped acting like that person you knew and stopped even wanting to be that person you knew, would you say that person was still alive? If I suddenly started doing evil things, would you blame the old me? Or would you say the person you loved was gone and you were free to hate this new person? I don't know. That's such a weird question. I think you're right that does make sense, that he's like, maybe I'm going to get my memories and I'm not going to be this good person anymore.
Yeah, it could also just be a simpler example of, well, what if I was good and became bad? Would the good person still be alive? And you're saying you're being hypocritical because I was bad and I'm now good, but you're still blaming me for the bad things.
Yeah.
When if I was good and became bad, you would
still think that I'm a good person.
Yeah.
Or redeemable. I think that's where I thought it was originally going, but I do wonder if what you're saying, if that makes sense, that he would maybe go and get his memories or something like that. I don't know. That scene just made me like really sad.
Yeah, we also have the possibility here of something weird happening during the ritual, because she is now also a wizard.
That's true.
He was saying it requires 4 wizards.
And now she'd be a 5th.
But anyway.
I don't know. There's a lot to digest. I'm sorry. This is kind of like a big episode as far as like the scenes were relatively quick. Sorry that I was kind of bouncing around in them a lot, but like the scenes were relatively quick, but they just felt very deep. And I'm like, I don't think that I have enough time to go through all of my thoughts about all of the little pieces of them.
I suppose. I'm feeling the same way, honestly.
So did you learn anything today?
I learned that you can sneak into rooms if the room thinks you belong there.
I liked that. I think I learned that even puzzle games can be roguelike.
That's right.
So where can people find us?
People can find us on Facebook.
At A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm.
They can follow us on Instagram.
At A Pot of Sass.
They could send us an email.
At apotofsass@gmail.com.
And donate to our Patreon.
Patreon.com/A Pot of Sass and Sarcasm. Also be on the lookout for a website that will eventually be here, hopefully soon. You can listen to new episodes Saturdays wherever you find podcasts. Please don't forget to rate, review, and share. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Hope you keep listening.
And we hope you stay sassy.
Later.
It was the only compliment that might have had an effect. It was the only compliment that might have had the effect. Hello?
Your mouth just did not like that.
The word effect.
Yeah.